Shalom, this is David Ben Shul, covering the subject about keeping and breaking the Torah. The two words that are typically used for breaking, or I should say keep and break, are not entirely translated properly into the English. So what I want to do is try to explain better what these words actually are saying in reference to the Torah itself. Keep and break. The word shamar, the Hebrew word shamar, typically translated as keep and obedience. Not always. There's other translated words for this, but typically that's the way it would translate into our Bibles. But the meaning of the word is actually cherish. And there's a difference between cherishing something and keeping it. This is where the heart's involved. This is where an individual is emotionally involved. This is where something is held onto tightly. Keeping doesn't necessarily convey that thought. And then, believe it or not, this word occurs in the Tanakh roughly 500 times. So it's a word that's used often. Now the word parar, typically translated as break, but its meaning is trample underfoot. So it's slightly different. And what I mean by the difference is when we think of breaking or keeping something, we think sort of in a generic sense or a sterile sense. Checklist. Okay. Rule number 1, you broke it. Okay, rule number 2, you broke it. Rule number 3, you kept that one. Rule number 4, you kept that one. That's the way we think of it. There's no emotional involvement. There's no deeper involvement of the person in those commandments. Rather, they obey them just because they're there, or they broke them because they were not there, or they didn't realize. But there was no earnest involvement with the individual to keep the commandment or break it. And what's also interesting is the word parar only occurs 50 times in Tanakh. So we see that our Creator is definitely trying to show us 10 times the amount of mercy by telling us to cherish. To cherish, the word cherish is very important to his vocabulary, where parar is not. It's important, but not as important. So it shows that God is definitely a merciful God 10 times over. Now I'm going to give an example of the word keep, as you can see here. Exodus 20 verse 6 says, "But showing loving kindness to thousands, to those who love me and keep," the word keep, shamar, "my commandments," NASB. Now you notice there's a red underline underneath the loving kindness. Just ignore that, just a spell checker. I didn't disable it. But the word shamar here is to keep. So basically, if we take our definition from our previous slide, we would see, but showing loving kindness to thousands, and this is within the 10 Commandments, to those who love me and cherish my commandments. Now, doesn't that give a different perspective here? This is something you cherish. This is something you want to obey. This is something you want to be part of. Now, let's go on to another verse here. Numbers 6:24. This is part of the Aaronic benediction that is given to the congregation by a Levite. The Lord the Lord bless you and keep, shamar, you. In other words, He doesn't keep you, He cherishes you. So this is an example where our God, our Creator, is cherishing us. And just as He cherishes us, we should cherish His commandments. So what's the point of this at this point? Well, we'll see. We see that keeping the commandments is not obedience, but rather is a cherishing. It's a heart, mind felt Um, it's held by our physical hands, our mental hands, our emotional hands. Now go to the word break. Leviticus 26:15. If instead you reject my statutes, and if your soul abhors my ordinances, so as not to carry out all my commandments, and so break parar, my covenant. Now let's read this by what this word actually means. If instead you reject my statutes, and if your soul abhors my ordinances, so as not to carry out all my commandments, and so trample underfoot my covenant. It's talking about a deliberate act. It's not talking about accidentally breaking the Torah. It's talking about a vicious, premeditated, I am going to do this. It's not talking about making a mistake because you didn't realize that you broke a commandment. This is talking about intentional breaking of commandments. Now, let's see another verse. This is in Psalm. Psalm 119 is actually a psalm about the Torah itself. All 176 verses deal with Torah. So that Psalm 119 is explicitly speaking of and is in support of the Torah. Now, 119, verses 126, 127. And I will read them as what the words actually mean. It is time for the Lord to act, for they have trampled underfoot thy law, the Torah. Therefore I love, cherish. Now the word shamar is not used here, but do you get an inkling here that this is what is being spoken of in this verse, in 127? Therefore I love, cherish thy commandments above gold, yes, above fine gold. So what is this telling us? This is telling us that the commandments is not a list of rules and regulations to be followed. The Torah is not a list where someone goes with a checklist and a pad saying, oh yeah, commandment 127, oh, you kept that one, oh, you broke this one. It's not that type of thing. The keeping of the commandments is through cherishing the Creator, cherishing His words, cherishing the Torah. And even if you make a mistake, that's okay. The Torah is fine with that because you're cherishing the Torah. Take a look at King David. He did some pretty bad things, yet he was after the heart of God. Why is that? Because he cherished the Torah. And when he fell and made a mistake, he got back up, dusted himself off, admitted what he did, and moved forward. Because he cherished the Torah. Okay. So, I hope this gives a better understanding of the Torah itself, and may this be a blessing to you. Shalom, shalom.